should do. It's not live, right?
It is.
Okay. It's gonna say the whole thing live with that. Allah. That's what I get for playing, right?
Live. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome to another podcast with Ustad William Halim Brianis. Inshallah, today we're continuing on our overarching theme of the world of the unseen, the world of the unknown, the one that really we don't know about, except what the Prophet ﷺ has taught us about. So inshallah, today's topic is going to be about Hasad. And how is it that we can protect ourselves from evil eye? What is evil eye? Is it possible to get evil eye through a camera? Is it possible to get evil eye from listening about someone? Or do you have to directly look at it? I mean, what's the situation with evil eye? How do we protect ourselves? Ustad Halim, jazakallah khair for everything.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala ashraf al-mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa ba'ad. Alhamdulillah, we get these. I told Salman, I said, I'm not going to prepare anything, and whatever you tell me the title is, we'll just feed off of that. But I did come expecting to talk about jinn. So I guess we'll completely talk about something new tonight, inshallah. And talking about Hasad and the Ayn, the Prophet called Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam al-Ayn haqqun, yani the eye, the evil eye is a reality, it's real and true. And we have to understand that things that we, subhanallah,
You're good.
So the problem comes in with, honestly speaking, and let me start by saying this caught me completely off guard because I was expecting labas, mashallah. So what we want to talk about with regard to Hasad is that I already said the Prophet ﷺ said al-ayn haqqun, yani the evil eye is real, it's true. There's a reality there, even though we don't understand it in our day and age, even though we don't understand it scientifically, there's a reality. And from that, what I would say is that, other than Sidi Mahmoud's having a difficult time, mashallah, please forgive us our shortcomings. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ إِمْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَىٰ. So, actions are but by intentions, and every person shall have that which they intend. And so, our actions in this world, I think that a good place to start. We're good? Okay. A good place to start is to say, I remember some of my teachers teaching me in public school, higher education actually, but it is what it is. That meaning not Islamic education. We learn.
Yeah, you can continue.
So I'll just keep going like you guys aren't doing all this stuff in the background. So I won't tell you that. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
go ahead, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm gonna find a way.
Oh, this was actually working.
Was it?
Yeah.
So.
Okay. The right thing.
Maybe we start over now to do that. That's inshallah.
Okay. Oh, I see.
We have that or not?
No. Oh, okay. We're good.
Okay, inshallah. Bismillah. So, I remember, so we'll start. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ba'ad. What we remember from our teachers is this, is that if you was to look at an atom, then the nucleus of the atom is about the size of a marble in the middle of a football field. And then you have the electrons going around. So you have the proton and neutron in the center, and you have the electron going around. And the electron going around that marble that's in the middle of the field marble being, the size of a quarter in the middle of a football field, and then you have equal-sized protons and neutrons going around the outside, like the bleachers of the football field, right? Everything else other than that is space. And then when you look at the nucleus itself, when you look at the protons and neutrons of the atom itself, then it's actually quarks, and there's 3 quarks, 2 up, 1 down, or vice versa, whatever the case might be. There's up quarks and down quarks. And they are about the size of, if you could imagine, 3 grains of sand, right, inside of a basketball. And so, again, you have all of that space around 3 grains of sand inside of a basketball is empty space, right? So what is all of that empty space? So matter as we know it, this metal that we see, our flesh that we see, all of these things are made up of molecules. The molecules are made up of atoms. The atoms are made up of subatomic particles. They're made up of quarks, and so forth and so on. All of this, when you get down deeper, even though this looks solid, even though this looks solid, right? The reality is that most of it, 98% of it is empty, right? It's empty space. But what is that emptiness, right? That emptiness is energy. And we live in a world where we understand matter. We're raised to be materialists, whether we like it or not. We're raised in a time where the real teaching is not spiritual, the real teaching is not intellectual, the real teaching is material. So if most of us are raised to be scientists, how do you say this even? The faith in science. So scientism is a faith, a blind following of science, right? A blind faith in science. And most of us are raised up to believe in science. And so if science says it, it's true, right? If faith says it, we have to question it. We have to investigate. We have to criticize it. We have to deconstruct it. But if science has said it, khalas, whoever science is, right? And so this is how we've been raised to believe. And so what we see in the world is that all of matter is made up of solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. And in the past, of course, plasma was called ether, right? And then they got rid of ether, said, no, this is not real, this is something made up. And then they brought it back in this last century, calling it plasma, but the same thing. And so you have solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. All of matter goes back to these states, but all of the matter is made up of molecules. All the molecules is made up of atoms. All the atoms, subatomic particles, all of that gluon, quarks, so forth and so on. So what I'm saying to you is that all matter, whether it's plasma, gas, liquid, or solid, all of it is made up of 98% empty space, or energy, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ إِمْرِئٍ مَا نَوَىٰ. When we talk about this narration, a lot of times what we talk about is good deeds, rewards, I'm sorry, all actions. Did I translate it? I forget if I translated it.
I thought you were my intentions.
Okay, I didn't know if I translated it yet or not. Sometimes I didn't. Okay, indeed, all actions are but by intentions, and every person will have that which they intend. So when we hear this narration, a lot of times what we are taught is about good deeds and in intending to do good. What is an intention? What's the difference between an intention and, for example, hamma? What's the difference between all of these hadith and nafs and all of these things? So we're taught about these things, and we're taught about the reward for good deeds and the reward for bad deeds. We're taught about all of that, and that's fitting given the rest of the hadith and given the history of the hadith, where this hadith comes from, all of these things. But the words of the Prophet ﷺ, like the words of the Quran itself, are general. And so if it can mean that, it does mean that, right? And so from these words, what a person sends out from themselves, what you intend, that's what happens, right? And then you will get whatever you intended. So you send out from your heart, you send out from yourself into the universe. And then the universe is going to send you back whatever you sent out from yourself. Right? So why am I talking about this when we asked about Hasad? What does any of this have to do with Hasad, right? Well, it doesn't have anything to do with jinn. No. So
Okay.
The reason that I went on all of this is because what I want to say is that the same action can be, it can either lead to good or it can lead to harm. Alright? So for example, if a sheikh, someone with a pure heart, so a parent, a mother, it doesn't have to be a sheikh, a mother who's a good, righteous mother, looking at her child, smiling at her child, longing, wanting, hoping, praying for good for that child, sends out what to the child? Good. And so the child benefits from that. We send energy out. We do, right? If after this program, right, I'm going to show you guys this. I'm going to prove it to you. How I can affect you, Mahmoud, from where you sit. And I don't have to touch you at all, right? I can affect you from here, right? It's because this is the world that we live in. It's made up of energy, right? So a mother sends out positivity, she sends out good cheer, she sends out hope, she sends out love, right? You send out love from yourself, and it affects people. There's scientific studies for all of this, right? In Sufism, right, they have a term for this. Do either of you know the term? See, now one of you have read my book. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Tawajjuh, right? Tawajjuh. When the sheikh looks at you, right? When the sheikh looks at you and he passes on that spiritual essence to you. So he is a spiritual person and he wants you to be elevated spiritually. So he sends out to you that energy, right? This is a term that's used, it's reality, Allahu A'lam. I'm not going to stick my neck out. We'll just say that this is a term for it, right? Khalas, la bas. Now, if somebody looks at you and they don't want you to succeed, they don't want you to be good, they don't want good for you, and they look at you with that hasad in their heart,
yeah,
it affects you. It affects you. Because they're sending this out. The same way good thoughts and good feelings and wanting excellence for somebody can be sent out with a gaze. So can harm. So can harm. And this energy is real. So people become sick. The physical manifestation of most of our sicknesses is because we haven't treated our energy body to take care of it before it has manifested physically. So a lot of times what has happened is we have become so bombarded, so attacked with negativity, with this ayn, right? With the evil eye. People look at you with an intent of harming you. That's what the ayn is. They've looked at you with an intent of harming you. The intent of removing something from you. The intent of blocking something from you. And so they've looked at you and they've sent this negative energy. And before you have a chance to repulse it because you haven't known that you were hit with this, why would you be hit with it? You haven't done anything wrong, right? Then it starts to manifest energetically in your body. But then also it also begins to affect you physically. Right? And so it affects the same way that what you send out into the world will affect you. If somebody else sends out evil, this is the nature of evil. We've talked about this. Evil spreads. Right? So you might not have done the evil. So if you haven't done the evil, you're not accountable for the evil. You're not blamed for the evil. But that doesn't mean that you won't suffer the consequences of the evil. Somebody robs you, right? You didn't cause them to rob. You didn't ask to be robbed. It's not your fault that you got robbed. You're not blamed for being robbed. But certainly you suffer the consequences of that robbery. You're out of your money, right? And so the same way is that with the ayn, if somebody sends this out to you, it's not your fault. You haven't done anything. But you're still suffering the consequences of somebody else's evil. Right? And their evil has been directed at you. They have sent this out to you. And so this is what we understand. What is hasad exactly? So we'll talk about hasad. Hasad is not envy in and of itself. Right? It's not envy in and of itself. Hasad, it's an envy, it's a jealousy where you don't want the other person to have it. It's not that you want it for yourself. Sometimes you do. But it's that you don't want the other person to have it. So for example, you have an excellent, everybody knows this, right? You have a beautiful voice, and a beautiful recitation. May Allah increase it in you. Ameen. So Mahmoud and I, we would love to have a recitation like yours, right? We envy that recitation, right? But we don't want to take that from you, right? So see the difference? We would like the like of what Allah has blessed you with, but we don't say Allah misplaced it. Why do you give it to him and not me, right? We don't say that. We don't say, oh Allah, strip it from him and give it to me. Right? You have a Ferrari, I know you don't. You have a Ferrari, and I think that you should lose your Ferrari and I should have a Ferrari. Right? That's Hasad, where you actually want the other person to lose what they have so you can have it. Or just so that they can lose it. Because you don't want them to have it if you can't have it. If I can't have it, nobody can have it. Right? So when you have that feeling, I wish that they would lose it because I don't have it. Right? Whether I want it, or I'm just mad because I don't have it. Because it could go both ways. I want it so they shouldn't have it, or I don't have it so they shouldn't have it. Right? So either way, it's a removal from the other person. And when you send that out, when you gaze upon them, when you send this out from yourself, I don't want to use my eyes in any way because I don't want to accidentally send the eye, right? Because that can happen, right? A lot of times people are affected by the eye and they don't even know that they sent it out, right? Someone has done this to another person and they don't even know that they did it because their intention wasn't to harm the person, but their intention was, why do they have that? Why do they have that? And so with that gaze, they have struck this person with their negativity. And so in this way, alhamdulillah, this is when a person has this in their heart and they direct it to another person, this is when the ayn takes hold. This is when the ayn takes hold. And so it's not going to happen. Now, if a person is not looking at you, right? If a person is not looking at you, then what this falls under is really dua, right? So for example, if I'm alone in my room and I'm like, Ya Allah, why does he have that? He should please remove it from him. That's the only. But I can't conjure an image of so and so in my mind and then direct the ayn at him. The energy doesn't work that way. It has to be transferred. There's transference, right? So in this way, alhamdulillah, that's that. And we could talk more about that later.
Not through the camera?
Huh?
Not through the camera, for example?
What I believe is it can happen through cameras. So somebody could watch a video and just say, this guy, man, and they can harm somebody like that. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he gave us many remedies for the evil eye, many protections for the evil eye. From the best protections for the evil eye is the ruqya. The Prophet ﷺ taught us we don't need a raqi to do ruqya on us. We don't need some specialist to do it. We can do it ourselves. The Prophet ﷺ gave us general permission that we recite Qul huwallahu ahad, Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq, Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas 3 times in our hands. We spittle and we rub it every place that we can touch, everything that we can reach, right? Do that before we go to bed. That is a protection from the evil eye, right? The last 2 ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah, the ayat of Kursi, all of this is protection against the evil eye. However, if you are actually afflicted with the evil eye and you know who did it, ask them to make wudu and give you the water, and you wash with the water of their wudu, right? This is one of the ways that was given to us. This is once it's been afflicted. But, the reality is that, alhamdulillah, we anything more than that, I think we'll answer in Q&A because I think that I've been talking long enough. You had a question?
my question actually. Is there any relation between the hasad and the sihr, the magic, because it's the same ayat, right, to protect from sihr?
See, this is the problem that we get into, is that I put myself out there when we start talking about sihr, right? The reason is because I have a different understanding of sihr than what a lot of people have. And the reason is, first and foremost, before I became a Muslim, I was Wiccan, right? So I studied witchcraft. That was my faith before I became a Muslim. And so one of the things that I see as a believer, is that everything that we call sihr in Islam, right, it falls into one of 2 categories. True sihr. real sihr, right? The first sorcery, to be clear. The first is that everything that we can do as Muslims with good, positive energy can be done negatively, and that's considered sihr. As it's mentioned in the Quran when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Harut and Marut was sent, but they were sent to divide what they were sent with divided spouses, right? It divided spouses. And so we see here lust, we see division, we see harm. It's all going to be negative, right? But for example, ruqya as an example, right? If somebody does ruqya to heal someone, we don't say anything about this, right? But if somebody does ruqya to harm someone, we call it sihr, right? The same thing. And so most of what we know as spiritual exercises that can be used to heal people, to strengthen people, to do all these things, the opposite can be done, and we call that sihr, right? So this is why a lot of people feel uncomfortable with this topic, because the fact of the matter is that the topic is not, this is going to be funny, right? It's not black and white. I say that because there is black magic and white magic. But we don't call white magic in Islam. We don't call white magic. We don't call it that, right? We call it ibadah most of the time, right? That's what it comes down to. And so the things that we would call sihr, it has its equivalent most times. The second thing that we would call sihr, and this is really true sihr. This is the sihr that there's no difference of opinion about. There's no room for good, and that is any time an individual gets a jinn to help them. No matter, even if it's for something good. If you work with the jinn, that's sihr, that's not permitted. It's khalas. No, even what I already defined as sihr is not permitted if it's used negatively, right? But when a person, for example, uses a jinn to do whatever, right? This is sihr, and this is absolutely unlawful in Islam, with the death penalty for that, right? Even if a person, uses the, when I was a teenager, I had a book called the Necronomicon, and the Necronomicon is a book on necromancy, conjuring spirits, what we would call spirits, but now as a Muslim we know they're jinn, and they would have the symbols for the jinn, and they would have the name of the jinn and the incantation, and when you call them, how you all of that's recorded. And the thing is that if you want treasure, summon this jinn, right? And so the thing is that there's jinn for this, there's jinn for that, there's jinn, and people summon the jinn. They work with the jinn for power, for authority, for wealth, for all of these things. You have Muslim rulers, right? And we can name some of them who are known to actually be strengthened by an ability to call. They won't call them jinn because they understand that to do that, it's not lawful. And so what they'll do is that they'll say rijal al-ghaib, unseen men, and they'll call them by different things. But they seek strength in those things, And so the fact is that any time that you seek these beings to serve you, to strengthen you, to get for you, this is sihr, and this isn't permitted. And to answer your question, yes, all of those things that you mentioned, that I mentioned, are also protection against sihr as well, inshallah. One of my sheikhs, he taught me, he said, one of the protections against black magic specifically is the recitation of Al-Fatiha. You start with Al-Fatiha, then a salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then the Ilafi Quraysh 7 times, right? Because Allah is the one who keeps you safe from harm. And then the salawat, and then Al-Fatiha again. And then imagine, if you will, a blue light surrounding whatever you want protected. Yourself, your house, your family, whatever. These are things, because they're not from the Sunnah, we listen to them and we take them, and obviously, we have a repository of them. But it's not something I practice, and the reason I don't practice it is because where is the connection back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the companions? or even the tabi'in or the tabi'at tabi'in. And so if we don't have a sanad for it, then I'd rather give it a miss, inshallah. It's better to give it a miss, inshallah. So this is, you know,
So Hasad is not part, is not like a category from sihr, right? Or
no,
not
see,
related?
so this is the thing. You have 7 main diseases of the heart.
Mhm.
Right? So there's over 40 diseases of the heart. 7 of them are the main diseases of the heart. Let's see if I can do this. I don't know. It's been a while, right? So you have from the first is arrogance and pride. Kibr wa ujub, right? Then you have ghadab, right? Unwarranted anger, rage. Then you have amal, which is long hopes, right? No, let's stop with that first before we go there. Then you have riya. Where riya is important to be in the 4th position, right? So these 3 are important to be in the first 3 positions, and then riya, and you'll see why in a minute, inshallah. And then amal, long hopes, and then hasad and bukhl, right? So these are the 7. Hasad being envy, bukhl meaning stinginess. I know you know, but so these are the 7 key diseases of the heart, and all of them go back to 2 roots. The 2 roots are love of this dunya and heedlessness of death. Heedlessness of death. No, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Love of prestige and heedlessness of death, right? Love of prestige, love of leadership, love of being known. And this is why we're proud because we want people to know, don't you know who I am? We're arrogant because I'm better than you. Who do you think you are, right? And anger because my rules were broken. Who is this guy to cut me off in traffic? Doesn't he know I have places to go, right? And so really it's all about prestige. Who am I? And then Riyadh, the reason Riyadh is in the 4th place, the reason it's there is because that's actually the pivot point. It goes both ways. It's because people love prestige. Listen to my recitation, right? Not you, me. No, I'm joking. Astaghfirullah. Right? Listen to my recitation. But also on the other side, heedlessness of the hereafter, thinking that this life is it. And so I don't want to let anything go. I'm stingy. I cling to it, right? I don't know why he has all this wealth. Why don't I have the wealth, right? Because this life is it. I need it all. And amal, it'll all come to me. Whatever I need, if I need to deal in interest, if I need to, if I gotta fornicate, whatever the case might be, if I need to be intoxicated to get this job, whatever it takes, I'm gonna do it because this life is it, right? Heedlessness of the hereafter, right? And Riyah goes with that. So Riyah is really the pivot point here. And then these 2 roots go back to 1 seed. What's the seed? Hubb ad-dunya. Love of the hereafter. Love of this life, right? And hatred of death. And so here, love of this life is, if you can uproot that seed, if you can kill that seed, then you kill the rest. I went on this whole thing, not because I like to hear myself talk, but because you asked, is hasad sihr, or does it? No, it's one of the diseases of the heart. But it's a disease of the heart that will lead a person to use sihr. And so it's a cause of sihr, right? But it's not sihr in and of itself. Is that?
Right, yeah.
Let me see, did you have?
Yeah, so I actually have a lot of questions. We can have it.
So I'm the steam man, not the
Yeah.
Go
So,
real slow, come on.
Jazakallah khair, Ustad Halim. I actually had a bunch of questions. بس هو احنا should we pause?
No,
or
because
record?
it's electronic.
Okay. Alright. So alhamdulillah, I actually did have a few questions. And the first question...
I want to stop because if it's a human voice, like an actual human, like if someone was calling the adhan.
By the way, sorry, there was an adhan that was called from a cell phone, so we just want to make sure, do we stop at the cell phone?
Right.
Or?
Nah. So if you hear the adhan being called, your conversation should stop. Right? Like no matter how important you think it is, you should be quiet and you should respond to the adhan, right? But if it's an electronic adhan, this doesn't have the same, it doesn't have the same, you can, good adab, it's good adab, but it's not the same as if a human voice is calling it. Why? Because it's electronic, it's digital, it's not a real voice. Inshallah, and Allah knows best about these things.
So for Drift Azan already died many years ago.
Huh?
Which is
Already Drift Azan, this guy died many years ago.
Yeah.
Alright, so I guess the first question is that you mentioned that if you don't, or if you're not directly the cause of evil, you still may feel the effect of it. Is this similar to the hadith where Aisha says, radallahu ta'ala anha, that she narrates upon the Prophet ﷺ that towards the end of time there will come 3 armies, so I don't know if she was the one narrating it, but there was 3 armies, they will all go towards Arabia, they'll all be sunk in the hole, and Aisha asked the Prophet ﷺ, she said, okay, but what about the people that weren't actually doing anything wrong, they just happened to find themselves in the army, does the sinkhole take them too? And then the Prophet ﷺ said yes. So is
Prophet
that like
said yes, and then they will be raised according to their intentions.
So is that like a concept in Islam?
What do you? There's something different here. This hadith is different because these are people who they are not caught up in the army. That's not the wording that's used. They're people who are in the army, but these people when they go towards the east, right? Because they're going towards the east, towards Arabia. They're coming from the west. When they go towards the east from Arabia, then what's happening is they're going against the Mahdi and his forces. Right? And so it doesn't matter whether these people, because actually she said, what about the Muslims, right, amongst them? And so this is the part that's most amazing to me, is that there was a foresight that there would be Muslims amongst this army going to fight against the Mahdi. Right? So, alhamdulillah, the Prophet ﷺ said they'll all be swallowed by the earth, and then they'll be raised according to their intentions. So this whole scenario is different than what we're talking about here, inshallah. But there's absolutely a concept of you might get caught up. How many people, seriously, how many people, and I know that it's being recorded and all of that, but how many people go out fi sabilillah, they leave their home fi sabilillah, they're going sincerely in the way of Allah, and then they go there. There was a brother, I believe, from Minnesota. He was so sincere, alhamdulillah, left all of his family, left everything to go fight jihad fi sabilillah. And when he got to the group that he was in, someone from his group shot him in the head, right? So because they weren't the good people he thought they was, right? He went there expecting Islam. He went there expecting to fight fi sabilillah, and he found something else, and he found treachery, right? How many people that's the case? And so they're in the mix of these people who they're sincere. They went out sincerely for the sake of Allah, but they find themselves in the mix of people. Look at Johnny Walker Lynn, and I don't know his situation. He's just an example that I'm going to use, right? So what do they call it? Jihad Johnny, right? He just got released, or he's about to be released, or something like that. So he went to Afghanistan to fight alongside the Taliban, to spread the Taliban, to fight for Islam in Afghanistan against the Northern Alliance, and so forth and so on. Really against the corruption that was there. Right? So the Taliban, one of the things is we're taught the Taliban is a villainous enemy force, terrorists, and all of these things. But the reality is that if one studies the history of the Taliban from somebody who is not biased, right, a neutral observer, then we won't necessarily find what we were taught in this country. I'll just put it that way. So he went there before 9/11, before any of this took place, before Al-Qaeda was in the land. And he fought fi sabilillah along with the Taliban, and he studied with them, he fought with them. And then after 9/11, he gets caught up, right? And he gets arrested as a terrorist. But was he ever a terrorist? He was never a terrorist, never a terrorist. But he got caught up with them, right? So how many people we strive to do good, but we find ourselves in the mix of villainous people. And so we suffer the consequences of the people that we're around. We suffer the consequences of the situations and circumstances that we find ourselves in, no matter how sincere our intentions are. But on the Day of Judgment, we'll be held accountable for our intention, our actions, our choices. but also our intentions. Not just outwardly what it appears like to everybody else, but the inward realities that Allah alone knows. Inshallah. So, but that's not what we're talking about, but I wanted to make that clear, inshallah. That is certainly a concept in Islam. Another concept in Islam is the concept that evil spreads, right? And that's, I'll go back to that because that's really closer to our topic. And that is that, let me really stick my neck out there. And you guys might disagree with me, and it's okay, right? But, so for example, somebody is absolutely sincere. They believe that vaccines are a cure. They believe that they save lives, and they take their child and get their child vaccinated. But the vaccine, their child's allergic to the vaccine and they don't know. And so once they get their child vaccinated, something happens in this child's brain. There's a neurological injury or neurological infection or whatever, and the child is harmed, right? The parent didn't do harm to their child. The parent didn't intend harm to their child, but the people who gave, the people who said, no, these vaccines are 100% fine for everybody, and it doesn't matter, there's only enough mercury, it doesn't poison you in this one, but we're going to take 5 of these and put them together and give you all 5 at one time, right? The person who does that for benefit, for profit, that's evil, right? And so the child is affected by the evil of the corporations, right? And so it's not that the child did anything evil or the parents did anything evil, but there's a consequence. There's a consequence, and that's what we're talking about. Consequences. There's consequences.
Do you mind if I just take a look at the timing for your recording so I can note down the timings?
Okay.
If you want every now and then,
I'll
just
do that. Okay, so the second question that I had was, so we're talking about Hasad. Are we in the, if I have Hasad towards someone, I'm like, man, I want that car, why can he have it, this and that, am I indirectly saying that, Allah, you don't know what you're doing? So is that almost a statement of kufur or
see, this is the thing, is that it doesn't compromise all of that, but we don't call it that. Nobody has ever called it kufur, because most of it's done ignorantly. If a person consciously said, Allah clearly made a mistake on that one,
Yeah.
that's kufr, right? That's kufr. But if somebody has a feeling like, man, he shouldn't have got it, I should have got it, right? That's a feeling that they get, even if they nurture that feeling. But they're not saying, they're not even conscious of the fact, most of the time. They're not even conscious of the fact that they're blaming Allah. They're not even conscious of the fact that they're saying something bad about Allah. It's not a conscious thing that they're saying about Allah. They're simply looking at the material aspect, and they're not looking at the reality of it. And so they can't be blamed for kufr because they're just being ignorant at this point. You understand what I'm saying? It's not a conscious thing that they're trying to say about Allah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's kind of subconscious, or I guess, yeah. Alright, Jazakallah khair. And so the other question I had is, do you find us in society, I mean, at least me, I find this very interesting. Even people who have, let's say, they're far off the deen, they will believe in black magic and sihr and ayn, and they'll buy these. It's someone who just knows Allah as like some energy out there that's protecting, but never prays, they'll have like the Hasad bracelet and things like that. So would you say that people they believe more in the harm of like spiritual things than the healing of spiritual things? So the same person, if you were to say, yeah, if you do ruqya, it'll heal you, they'd be like, yeah, that's a joke. Or if you spit into your hands Surah Al-Fatiha or the 3 quls, they'll kind of laugh that off. But when it comes to black magic and Hasad, they're like, oh, we're all in. And I notice this, especially in the Arabs.
Because we tend to be superstitious people, right? We're always looking for bad omens, and for some reason, the truth is that our brains, the neurological studies that have been done show that our brains are quicker to attune to negative thoughts than to positive thoughts. Like you'll follow a negative rumination, faster than you'll start, yeah, this is good, I like this. And then if for some reason our brains seem more programmed towards that, to ruminate than to have positivity. And so positivity becomes an effort upon us. While rumination, if you just let your brain go, it'll go down that path. Why? I don't know what to say. But no, there's certainly this reality. There's certainly a reality that we find even atheists will believe in the negative before they believe in the positive. It's I don't know how to explain it, mashallah. I don't know.
Or even I know people who left the deen, like they're openly like ex-Muslim, but then they'll be like, yeah, when were you born? Oh, that's the zodiac, it's like,
But that's all part of kufur, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, isn't it?
But because if they're on the supposed moral high ground of how can you believe in this being who you haven't seen, but then they're going out and believing all these other random things.
Because I think that part of that, I think that part of it is that we experience unseen things all the time. We experience things. Most of us, we try to close it off. We could have synergistic moments where you're like, man, I'm really hungry, and then you see 5 signs for, a place to eat, and then you go there and your friend's already there, and you're like, wow, man, what a, because we have that, where it's like, how did this happen? We have moments like that, and we have, moments where we have dealings with unseen things regularly. I'm not talking about jinn or angels or anything. I'm just talking about things that happen, and we're like, wow, this is amazing. We have things that happen, so we can't really deny the unseen so much, right? But when a person wants to reject faith, when they want to deny God, when they want to have a sense of or a level of ingratitude for the bounties upon them, then it's really easy to say, I believe in this, this, and this, but I don't believe in that. It's difficult because without a single case, right, or a couple cases, then it's hard because there's so many different varieties of this. The astrology is a good variety. If you spoke to one of these people who believe in astrology, they would say no. Think about this. The moon affects the tide. You're made 70% of water. So you don't think the moon affects your body chemistry, right? And so they'll try to make it scientific because ultimately they're still looking at the physical world. They're still looking at the physical world. They're not looking at unseen things. They're trying to tie it into seen things, right? And so this is how they justify their kufur at the end of the day. Like I said, it's hard to make general statements because I could say this about this person, but 5 other people are like, no, that's not what I believe. Yeah, I know.
Alright, that's all the questions I had about this topic, unless Mahmoud, you had some, or there's some on the... Okay, alhamdulillah. Inshallah, what we're going to do right now is shift over to... Ooh, it's 10:25.
Shift over to what?
I was thinking of the QA.
محمود تأخرنا عليك
لا لا عادي خالص انا لسه كمان يا باشا يعني هنصلي ما تقلقش.
Alright, inshallah, we'll give it a shot. We'll shift over to the random Q&A portion. And so these are questions that I get from people throughout the weeks or throughout the days that ask them specifically of Sheikh Halim. And they're pretty hefty questions, and so I write them down and save them to ask him in person. They're unrelated, but we'll see, inshallah. Ustad Halim, you can give us some enlightenment. Let's see here. So the first question is going to be for you. I'll just note the time real quick. 43:40. The first question is that when Islam spread in the beginning, it seems like there was a lot of military conquests, and I'm not saying that in the context of the medieval world or perhaps the world before the UN and all this, that it wasn't unjustified, but what I'm saying is how can that be moral from an Islamic perspective that we go into our neighboring land that never asked for it and we just take over the land and we say, alright, now we're going to spread our da'wah. How is that justified in Islam?
Alhamdulillah, you know what's funny? I remember very vividly sitting in a class of higher education, and one of the students asked the sheikh about America versus the Sahaba, right? Because in a lot of ways we find America spreading its ideology by the proverbial sword. And, they go from land to land selling their ideology, and if the people don't buy it, then they threaten them with force, right? And so they said, what's the difference between what America is doing and what the companions did? And the sheikh, he couldn't answer. He got so upset. He said, if you don't know, he's like, if you don't know, I can't tell you, right? So I was like, Allahu Akbar. And I actually thought he was going to kick the person out of the class. But the reality is that, a lot of it does go back to the call. What are we calling to? Are we calling to good and evil, or are we calling to falsehood and corruption? Now, of course, that's not a justification, because the person who rejects Islam is going to say that we're calling to falsehood and corruption, And so that's not fair, and it's not a just method. So the first thing that we would say is that how did Islam actually spread in the beginning? That's the first thing to ask, is how did it spread? And so Islam, first and foremost, there were da'i, there was preachers, there were teachers who would go forth. There were people who would go visit these lands and call them to Islam. And then when these people were rejected, then the army showed up, right? And so the thing is that Islam didn't go and force people to convert. There's two aspects to this. The first thing is that unlike other peoples, Islam didn't force anyone to convert. They sent da'i, they sent teachers and preachers out. And when these people were, like my Sheikh Khalil Majalawi, he said any call has to have a power behind it. Any call has to have a force behind it. Because if you don't have a force, then it can be snuffed out, easily. And so what would happen is when these people were fought against, then the army was there. If these people were allowed to talk freely, speak freely, invite freely, then no army came, right? So the army only went when these people, the message was blocked. That's something that, because we are caught up in the modern vernacular, how things are understood now, when we see the word fathun, right? Fathun Mecca, we automatically think the conquest of Mecca. But it's not the conquest of Mecca, it's the opening of Mecca, right? And so these were opening so that people could hear the message and see the message. And this is the important thing. So when the army came, when this caller, when this preacher came and was killed or forced out or harmed or whatever the case might be, and the army came, the army, we know this, they gave them usually 3 ultimatums. Either you accept Islam, or you pay the jizya, or you fight, right? Khalas. So in this way, when the army fought, what did they do when they won? Question?
They established the deen, right?
They didn't establish the deen, right? How do you establish the deen?
Or like Islamic communities?
Huh?
Start the da'wah.
No, the da'wah, what they did is they opened it up for the da'wah, but they established the sharia. They established the sharia, right? So the legal system was there. So the justice was there. The fairness was there. The peace was there, right? And then the people can hear Islam, the people can see Islam, the people can experience Islam, at least theoretically. One of the examples that I give is Syria. Syria, we have 2 different stories about Syria. Both Sham. When we say Syria, we mean Sham. So the first thing is that Khalid ibn Walid's army, I believe it was Khalid ibn Walid's army, he had conquered a land. No, he went to a land. The people agreed to pay the jizya. They set up the town. They started to, because part of the thing is that when you pay the jizya, you are then protected, right? You have a military there to protect you from invaders. You have police force to fight against crime. All of these things that come. People are taking care of the roads, the trash, water. All of these things are now taken care of. The municipalities are taken care of, right? And so they came into the town and they started to set up camp, right? And then they were called to fight a battle. Somebody needed reinforcements. So Khalid ibn Walid, he gave all of the wealth back to the people. Right? They said, what are you doing? We gave this to you. He said, look, we can't hold up our end of the bargain, so we're not going to take your money. They gave back everything and they left. Then when they came back, the people entered Islam because they saw that. They saw justice. They didn't just take our money and roll out. You know, they if they weren't able to do what they promised, they're fair people. But once Sham was entered and opened, right? How long before it became a Muslim majority?
2 generations?
400 years. 400 years, right? So 400 years from the time of the Sahaba who went into Balad al-Sham until Sham became a Muslim majority. Why? Because nobody forced Islam. They fought. Some places they had to fight, but they weren't forcing Islam. What they were forcing is a system of justice upon people, so that you didn't have tyranny, you didn't have, you know, and also people could hear the message of Islam. That's the whole thing, is that people can hear the message. Now you have areas throughout North Africa where there was constant fighting and things like that, and part of that is because the Muslims, you know, momentum builds, and so they rushed across North Africa and they didn't solidify anything. And so a lot of times they would go across, they would fight this tribe, take over this region, move to the next one. And then, you know, a month later they found these people were still fighting, and they're like, oh, let's go back and fight them again. And so this kept happening. But it was because they didn't fortify, you know, they just kept moving. And the reason is because they were trying to spread Islam as fast as possible, you know, and Allah knows best. So what we find, all of that to say that, and I don't even remember the initial wording of the question, but what I want to say, you could reiterate it to make sure that I answer it properly.
Islamically justified.
No, okay, so the thing here is that it's Islamically justified because nobody's fighting to force Islam on somebody. Nobody's fighting to force someone to become Muslim. They're fighting in order that people can actually hear the message. I just plug real quick. I just wrote the message to the white man in America, right? So one of the things that I write in one of the important things about the message to the white man in America is that this is the first time in the history of the white man in America that the message has come to them in a pure form, right? Not through me. I'm talking about this generation right now. Before this, even in this time, most of the message of Islam that they hear comes from Fox News or even CNN. You know, liberals even twist it. So whether you're looking at conservatives or liberals, even Muslims who are politicians are twisting it, right? And so even Muslims who aren't politicians are twisting it. And so when do they get the pure message? When in the history have they gotten the pure message? Because they've always, the powers that be had control. So the people never got the message, right? So when these armies came, what they did is that they allowed the message to reach the people.
But are you not like infiltrating innocent people's lands and things like that, just to spread the message? Going over into a town and being like, all right, I'm gonna take over this neighborhood.
No, because again, what the first thing that they did is that they were never the.
So they didn't start with the military.
Let me also begin by saying they were never supposed to be. Whether they were or not is a whole different issue, because humans are humans, and that's one thing that needs to be understood. Is humans are humans. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. You know, injustices were done. I'm not gonna pretend, oh no, they were all good people. No, that's just not the reality. But what was supposed to be done is that the message was sent forth. And if the message was permitted, not accepted, but permitted, then khalas, no problem, right? No problem. If that one person, so for example, you come into this is Woodlawn, the neighborhood's called Woodlawn, right? You come into Woodlawn, right? The people are letting you.
Gwynnock, I think, right?
It's actually between, so
Oh.
it's Franklin Town, so it's
If you stand on one side, right, and the people aren't fighting you, they're not chasing you out, they're letting you call, and in the morning at Fajr you call the adhan for your prayer, right? It's not lawful for any Muslim to come and invade this, even if you're the only Muslim, right? Because you're given the freedom to establish your prayer.
I see.
So, but when you're kicked out, when you're fought against, when you're struggled against, not when you're rejected, because they have a right to reject the message, but when you're not allowed to call, that's when the army would come, right? And so,
Jazakallah khair. I think for the sake of time, I'll ask only 2 questions. I have more, but This one was asked by a brother, and he said that in Islam, it's pretty clear the role of a husband in marriage. The Prophet ﷺ says that the husband has to provide for the family, kind of be the source of income. And when it comes to the wife, a lot of times we say, or scholars say that, oh yeah, the wife needs to raise the children, but where is the actual isnad for that?
There's no isnad for that. There's no isnad for that. The wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Khadija had a business, radiallahu anha, right? Juwariya, I believe it was Juwariya, could be mistaken. She used to tan leather, sell it, and take the money that she earned and give it in sadaqah, right? She worked, right? No problem. The wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet himself sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he raised Ali, he raised Zayd, right? Hassan and Hussein climb on his back. Usama ibn Zayd climbs on him, plays with him, right? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in prayer, one of his grandchildren from one of the other daughters, she came up during the prayer, or the child came up during the prayer. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam picked her up while he was praying, sat her down when he went into ruqya and sajda. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is active in raising the children. He's active in raising the children. We look at Zubair ibn Awam radiallahu anhu and his son Abdullah. Who is Zubair's wife? Oh, astaghfirullah. Asma bint Abi Bakr, right? So Zubair, when Abdullah was a small child, Zubair took him out to the outskirts of the city, took him out to the woods, right? And left him there, told him to sleep there overnight, right? And mother's like, it's a baby. He's like, no, toughen him up. He's got to be a man, right? Got to overcome his fears, right? So Zubair's taken an active part in, raising his son as a strong, fearless warrior. Now when he's an old man, when he's an older man, when his mom's 70 years old and blind, she can't even see, he goes to her and asks if he can be martyred, because he was the Khalifa at that time, right? And she gave him permission, and she hugged him, and she said, what kind of person seeks martyrdom and wears this armor? Right? She felt it on him. And he said, I only wore it to comfort you. Right? So he took his armor off. But the point being is that here his mom is, go be a martyr. If you're about it, be about it, right? So my point being is that his father raised him this way and his mother reinforced it. It's not just a mother's role to raise children. It's the father. Fathers need to be there. A father needs to be there, an active participant in raising boys to be men and raising girls to be dignified and honored, so that they don't seek that from other men. Right? Men are important in raising their children. We have to be. Right? And so anybody who thinks that raising children, cleaning the house, if anybody thinks cleaning the house is a woman's job, they don't know the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They just don't know him. It's that simple, right? So part of being a man is being like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we see him active in the lives of these children, and we see him active in the family, and we see him playing with his wives and all of these things. We have a false bravado, a false understanding of masculinity that needs to be healed, inshallah.
Like 1 minute 40 seconds remaining.
Oh, okay.
What's up?
It's
So-
the limit.
There's a limit?
There's a
There's
1
a
hour
limit.
limit.
Okay.
So then, what would you say is the clear-cut role of the husband and the wife in a marriage?
Very simple. The husband is the guardian and protector of the wife, of her body, of her honor. Right? This is important. As far as providing for her, that is her right. It's her right to be provided for. That she has shelter, that she has nutrition, and that she has clothing. And we would say education as well, because that's a bias that we have. So this is a right. This is the right that the wife has over the husband. As far as now, there's something else that I'm thinking about here that is also the role of the husband. But those are the main 2 points right there. That he is the protector and maintainer, the defender of his wife. And so if somebody says something about her, he defends her, right? He doesn't just let people dishonor his wife. Any man who allows his wife to be dishonored, they lack manhood, right? They lack manhood. The other thing is that, like I said, that he takes care of these things that are her right, right? So you don't have to get her the biggest anything, but you have to make sure that she has what she's supposed to have. Her role, her responsibility is that she guard in his absence that which Allah was